For almost every era of Starfleet, the warp core was impossible to miss. Step aboard the original Enterprise, the Galaxy-class Enterprise D, Voyager, or the Sovereign-class Enterprise E, and deep inside engineering stood the heart of the ship, a towering vertical chamber where matter and antimatter combined in a carefully controlled reaction. It wasn't just another piece of machinery, it was the symbol of Starfleet engineering. Lose the warp core, and you lost the ship. Then the 32nd century arrived. Starships became sleeker. Warp nacelles detached from the hull. Programmable matter transformed everything from bridge consoles to repair systems. Yet one of the most important components in any Federation vessel seemed to vanish. Where was the warp core? At first glance, it almost looks as if Starfleet abandoned it altogether. Engineering compartments no longer revolve around a massive glowing reactor, and the familiar vertical core that dominated earlier ships is nowhere to be seen. But appearances can be deceiving. The first thing we need to establish is what the series actually tells us. Despite the dramatic redesign of 32nd century ships, there is no indication that Starfleet abandoned matter-antimatter propulsion. Warp travel still exists. Starships still generate warp fields. Dilithium remains an essential resource, especially in the aftermath of the burn. Those facts strongly suggest that some form of warp core still exists. The mystery isn't whether the warp core survived. The mystery is why we no longer see it. To answer that, we need to look back at why older starships were designed the way they were. For centuries, the warp core occupied a massive vertical chamber near the center of the ship. This wasn't simply for dramatic effect. A matter-antimatter reaction produces unimaginable amounts of energy, which had to be carefully regulated before being converted into electroplasma and distributed throughout the vessel. The central location shortened critical power pathways, simplified maintenance, and allowed engineers to monitor the reactor continuously. It also made emergency procedures possible. If a warp core became unstable, Starfleet crews could eject it before a catastrophic breach destroyed the ship. That safety system saved countless vessels across Federation history. In other words, the classic warp core wasn't merely an engine. It shaped the entire architecture of the starship around it. But every design reflects the technology of its own era. By the 32nd century, Starfleet had access to programmable matter, vastly more capable computers, and structural field technologies centuries beyond anything available to Captain Picard or Captain Janeway. Instead of improving the old engineering layout, designers appear to have rethought it from the ground up. This is where we move from established canon into informed engineering analysis. One possibility is that the warp core has become dramatically smaller. Throughout real technological history, powerful machines have often become more compact as efficiency improves. Computers that once filled entire rooms now fit inside a pocket. It isn't unreasonable to imagine a similar trend for warp reactors after nearly 800 years of scientific progress. A second possibility is that the reactor is no longer confined to one iconic chamber. Programmable matter allows ship systems to reconfigure themselves in ways earlier engineers could never imagine. Rather than centering the vessel around a single visible reactor room, Starfleet may have distributed supporting systems throughout the ship while keeping the core itself deeply protected inside the hull. That approach offers several advantages. A hidden reactor is a harder target during combat. Maintenance can be performed by automated systems instead of large engineering crews. Internal layouts become more flexible because designers no longer need to build an entire deck around one enormous piece of equipment. Even emergency response could improve. Earlier crews often had to race into engineering to stabilize a failing warp core. A highly automated 32nd century vessel could detect, isolate, and compensate for failures long before a humanoid engineer even reached the compartment. In many ways, the disappearance of the visible warp core reflects a broader change in Starfleet philosophy. Older ships proudly displayed their engineering marvels. The warp core stood at the center of the vessel because it represented the pinnacle of Federation technology. The 32nd century takes the opposite approach. Its greatest technologies are almost invisible. Detached nacelles replace physical supports with advanced fields. Programmable matter replaces rigid machinery. Interfaces emerge only when needed. From that perspective, hiding the warp core isn't a mystery at all. It's exactly what technological maturity looks like. The engine didn't disappear. It simply stopped announcing its presence. And perhaps that's the clearest sign that Starfleet engineering had entered an entirely new age. So, where did the warp core go? The simplest answer is, it probably never went anywhere. Although Star Trek, Discovery never explicitly shows us a traditional warp core inside its 32nd century starships, nothing in canon suggests that Starfleet abandoned matter-antimatter propulsion. Warp travel still depends on immense amounts of energy, and dilithium remains one of the Federation's most valuable resources. The familiar glowing column may have disappeared from view, but the technology that powers faster-than-light travel almost certainly evolved rather than vanished. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part of this mystery. As technology advances, the most revolutionary inventions often become the least noticeable. We no longer marvel at the tiny processors inside our phones, even though they're vastly more powerful than room-sized computers from decades ago. In the same way, the 32nd century may represent a future where warp reactors are smaller, safer, smarter, and so seamlessly integrated into the ship that they no longer require an entire engineering cathedral built around them. Of course, until Star Trek officially opens the doors to a 32nd century engineering deck and reveals exactly how these ships generate warp power, much of this remains informed speculation. But that's part of what makes Star Trek so compelling. The franchise has always invited us to fill the gaps with science, engineering, and imagination, encouraging us to think not only about what future technology looks like, but why it evolves the way it does. So what do you think? Has Starfleet simply miniaturized the warp core? Is it hidden somewhere deep inside programmable matter systems? Or has an entirely new method of matter-antimatter power generation replaced the iconic reactor we've known for centuries? Let me know your theories down in the comments. I genuinely want to hear them.